Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Torrance, and welcome to Magic is Real, a podcast focused on proof of afterlife, whose mission is to bring hope and inspiration to others and to spread the word that death is only an illusion. If these interviews resonate with you and you want to hear more like them, you can support the podcast by liking, subscribing, and sharing with like-minded friends. Thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of the Magic is Real family. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello, Magic is Real listeners. Thank you so much for being here, whether it's your first time or you've watched every single episode. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but it is my pleasure to bring to you today a conversation with Peter Anthony. Insert applause here. Hi, Peter. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you so much, Shannon, for having me on your show today. And I also want to say thank you to your audience who are watching and or listening to this. And you made a choice today, and that I have to honor. So thank you very much.
Amen. So let me tell you about Peter. Many of you probably have seen him speak before. He is a speaker, a writer, a near-death experiencer, an international psychic. And I forgot to ask if you're a medium or a psychic or both, if you're a psychic medium or just a
Well,
psychic.
yeah, people have called me everything. I kind of look at myself as a ghost chaplain. so
Yes.
yeah, so that's or the ghost whisperer, even though I don't want to use that word, but that's pretty much what I do. I communicate. Um, I think telepathically with ghosts, as do they with me. So it's usually done through whispers and or through the third eye.
They do with me too, so I know exactly what you mean. And what I also am interested in is that you are a paranormal investigator on top of everything else. And that we'll get into because there's so much controversy in this community about that kind of thing. So I'd love to not get controversial, but just kind of delve into that. I am so interested to hear your story about your spiritual journey, not just your near-death experience, but and how it changed you. But I would love to know what your life was like even before all of that happened, and what were your spiritual beliefs, and how did you grow up and that sort of thing.
Well, it's like pre near death, post near death. Who I was before, and I mentioned while we were talking behind the scenes here, I stuttered. It wasn't, noticeable to many, but I did have a speech impediment. Extremely shy, introverted, was born and raised Catholic in an Italian Catholic family, so very strict Catholic. I was an amazing artist, so my gift as an artist was my dream, my goal, because of my artistic background, was to get into special effects. That was my desire. That was my goal. That was my dream. And so all those things prior to my near-death experience seemed to go out the door and come back with new information after my near-death experience. So shy, introverted, speech impediment, born and raised Catholic. I lost my family, most of my family, by the time I was 21. So I became an orphan at a very young age. So my whole connection to God, spirit world, at that time, after all the deaths of the family, I kind of came back as this very angry young man, like, why would you take my sister away? Why would you take my family away? Why would you take my father away from me? And so I went from this very strict Catholic upbringing to believing in nothing. My idea was you work, you make money, you get married, you have children, you buy a house, you pick a fence, blah, 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 blah. That was kind of my goal. And then, of course, that all changed as a result of my near-death experience. So who I was in the beginning and who I became, it's a 180-degree turnabout.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to hear. You can even tell me now if you think that was all part of the design, because it feels like so many people that have near-death experience, not everyone, but have really suffered in sort of remarkable ways, not just your average. It feels like a lot of times it all lines up with this is kind of the path that you need to go through to get to that next level. I don't know how you
Well,
feel about that.
yeah, I can relate to that, and but I can also relate to so many of us who've had near-death experiences. I think when we come back, and as did, well, I can at least speak for myself, the journey back, getting reacquainted with a new world, if you will, was just as riddled with so many naysayers and those who didn't believe, and I was so excited to come back. So the struggle going in and the struggle learning to accept what happened to me was in itself critical. And I think I can speak for many near-death experiences. You know, it's not an easy road that you take when you come back, because obviously you have a whole new world vision. You have a new vision of self, and you come back with information. And it took me years, exactly 7 years for me to digest the information, because, you know, again, back when I had my near-death experience, many didn't believe. We didn't even call it a near-death experience. You know, my doctor said to me, you had a close call, you kind of checked out for X amount of minutes. Um, it wasn't until he started seeing and listening to me and how I changed, and he knew me really well, he began to believe. So I was lucky enough to have a doctor, my personal physician, who believed what happened to me, and a nurse who basically saved my life and watched what I went through in terms of recovery. So the blessed part of that conflict was having two people in the medical industry who listened to me and believed. If I didn't have those two people, I don't know where I would have been. Well, I don't think I'd be here today.
Right. Yeah, no, I would love to hear about that story. I know that you are a producer, and I know that you were like me, for some part. I know you were in New York City, yeah, and in Los Angeles, but you were working the entertainment lifestyle. I mean, the entertainment industry lifestyle. Is so. Tell us about that and how this sort of
Well,
segued into your
yeah, gosh,
experience.
in the I guess the perfect storm of this was I was in the height of my career with CBS News, working with Dan Rather, Leslie Stahl, Face the Nation, Diane Sawyer when she was there with CBS. So many different prominent senators and congressmen, and then of course, you know, being in the entertainment industry, and we did so many different interviews. I was lucky enough to work with so many film stars and TV stars and singers, and you know, you just name it. There was a whole, you know, an assortment of different people in the entertainment industry. So I was very lucky in that part of my career. But again, I think for me, you know, I think I was one of those near-death experiencers who came out kicking and screaming, because my whole world was very set with an opinion of you live, you die, you make your money, all those different things. And then I came back kind of in a gray area to learn to digest the information, to apply it to my own personal life, and then to go out and accept what happened to me and not listen to the naysayers. And there were a lot of naysayers back during the 80s and 90s. So for me, I say to all my people who come to me who have high profile careers, and so many don't want to share those stories, you have to stand on your own truth. And it took me from 1987 until 2007 to do so. And the only reason why I came out was because my boss, you know, kind of called me aside, and I guess some of the people I've been working with said, you know, this guy's a paranormal investigator. I saw him on the History Channel. I saw him on Fox. And so she called me in and she said, I need to find out something. And I thought, oh gosh, she's going to ask me about something any other than this. I wasn't expecting
Right.
that. She said, are you a paranormal investigator? And I just froze. and and I said, well, you know what? I said, yes, I am. And she, why didn't you say anything to me? And I said, I just, you know, I was working Monday through Friday, and I was on an airplane on Friday night to go work on some case, you know, some unsolved murder mystery, and then fly back to late Sunday night. And I did this for years, and no one knew. And then as I climbed the ladder through, I guess, through all the ratings, people were seeing me. And so I thought, you know, I'm going to have to just give her my notice. And I gave her a year's notice that I will be out of here by 2008. I'm going to write a book. And I said, I'm going to move back to California. And she was just stunned. And so I did it. And exactly 1 year to the day I gave my resignation, I found someone to replace me, terminated my contract, moved not back to Los Angeles, but back into California. And I started with zero. And I wrote a book, and I literally, as soon as it came out, I thought, okay, I had to learn how to do lectures. I had to learn how to speak on camera. I didn't know. I was always behind the scenes. So all these things were all new to me, but because I was so passionate about it, I just kind of swam in the water towards it, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And so from behind the scenes to going in front of the scenes, it was a journey in itself. So
Yeah.
looking back at it, did I make the right decision? Absolutely.
Hmm.
And everything up to that point, from CBS to my years in the television film industry, going from news to nighttime soaps to sitcom to reality, and then of course becoming a paranormal investigator. It was almost as though something was kind of predestined or pre-aligned for me. And so I kind of look back at my life through the lens of a camera, and it feels as though I was kind of being guided towards this life. And so, as I said, when it all opened up effortlessly,
Yeah.
key word, then I knew I had made the right choice.
That is so cool. I'm not as high profile as you, so I don't have as many concerns about people thinking things. And plus, now I think so many people are awake. But yeah, kind of putting out there that, hey, I'm a medium. I actually don't care. My mom said, maybe you don't really want to post that. And I said, I literally know that this is what I meant to do. And nothing means more to me in this world. It brings me so much comfort and joy and peace to be able to do it. I literally don't if it's not for you, that's fine. You can love me and accept that, and we don't have to talk about it, or I really don't care if you think I'm crazy. It doesn't matter to me. It literally and I have built up this amazing community of people like you that do get it. So it doesn't bother me at all.
Well, I always say love what you do, and what you love will come along.
Yeah.
And it took me many years to finally understand that. But I kept repeating, I kept going through the motions. Every day was a step towards freedom, getting out of that world of corporate America. And, yes, the television film industry is corporate. I mean, you have CEOs and those who make decisions above you. And so you have to kind of play that game. And I think so many of us who came back from our experiences, we don't look at corporate America. We look at love, and we look at compassion, and how can we help people, and here's my message. And that didn't resonate with corporate America. So the choice I made to come forward, even going back to getting, I guess, busted, if you will, by my boss, I thought once I made that resignation, I thought, excuse me, I had to agree to that. I knew I had a year or two to kind of end my contract, and it gave me a sense of freedom, and it also gave me a kind of a push out of the nest.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah. I I think that's amazing that we know we're led, and there's nothing that anyone can say that'll my neighbors who are the most beautiful people, they're from Ethiopia, and just a few weeks ago they prayed over me and prayed that I'll
Oh,
find Jesus. And they don't even know the half of it, half of it, but they're like, "Do you do yoga?" And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Mm." Because they're very by the book, and and so it was so sweet. It was, and I said, "Absolutely, you can pray for me. There's prayer is beautiful, and I'm honored to have you do that for me." But they're like, "Are you a new age kind of person?" And then they immediately were like, "May we pray for you?" And I'm like, "It's fine, because I understand." But yeah, that's so I just love that. So now let's talk about your near death experience. I know a lot of people are in it for the near death experience. So what's your story?
well, the perfect storm. I was having a wrap party with CBS. We had finished working on a project with a wonderful celebrity. They were doing, I think, a salute to the MGM years, and then I was invited to go to another wrap party with a special friend of mine at the time, and I knew something was not right, because um, I kept feeling this pain in my abdomen and in my lower side of my stomach. You know, I didn't know what it was, but anyway, and it was also kind of a celebration of my birthday. And I went into the bathroom, and I just doubled over with so much pain, to the point that when I felt myself almost crumbling to the floor, I remember bracing myself against the sink, because I knew if I passed out, I would hit the floor, and I tried to brace myself. And I could feel that I was bleeding at the time, and I could see my suit, you know, bleeding. I could see it and feel it. And I want to backtrack just a little bit, because on June 4th of 1987, I went in to see a doctor, and I was complaining about some stomach pains, and unfortunately, I was misdiagnosed, and they thought I had a stomach ulcer, so they gave me Tagamet, not realizing that I had Crohn's disease and thus the bleeding. And back during the middle 80s, we were in the height of the AIDS epidemic, And I was losing so much weight. And here I was doing martial arts. I ran every day. I worked out. I was in an amazing shape. And here I'm going from 165 to 160 to 155 to 140. And while I was working, I was stuffing my suit with Kleenex and newspaper so you couldn't tell that I was losing weight drastically. And then add the fact that I had these little lesions on my neck and my face. So I was covering all that up with makeup and scared to say anything because, CBS at the time was a very conservative organization. And I thought, oh my God, your mind goes into a virus, the AIDS epidemic, and I didn't want to lose my job, obviously. And so I didn't go to my follow-up doctor interviews or doctor appointments. And I basically down vitamins and all my, you know, all the things that you try to do to take care of yourself when you think you're sick. And so that night, as I said, was the perfect storm. It was full moon. It was raining. I mean, everything that could add to the drama of that night did. And so I excused myself, went out the door, drove home. And when I got home, I just, before I could even get inside, I hit the ground. And I knew then I was bleeding all over myself. And I thought, oh my God, this is really bad. And I could feel myself going out of consciousness. Anyway, fast forward, I called a friend. I was rushed to the hospital. And oh God, on a full moon, ER night, anything that could have gone wrong did. And if it hadn't been, and when I say a friend, I didn't even know this man who volunteered to take me to the hospital, but he was very kind. Excuse me. And I can't believe I'm losing my voice.
Mhm.
But anyway, so fast forward, I eventually got to the ER, and I remember this. And as I said, I want to introduce someone who saved my life that night, Nurse Sullivan. The intern, in which no one wanted to, because at the time they thought AIDS was airborne, was reeling me down to the ER, and he was so scared of me. And I reached up and I asked him, I said, "What's wrong with me?" And he looked down at me, and he was suited up like it was radioactive, and I could see the perspiration on his forehead and his eyes. That's all I could see. And he pushed me over into a corner and left me there. And so here I am bleeding to death. And I must have been there an hour and a half. And this was an emergency exit. And so this nurse came down the hall, saw me in the back near the emergency exit. And she came up and approached me, and she could see that I was very ill. She could see at that time the makeup had come off my neck and I had all these brown lesions on my face. And she kind of stood back, and I begged her to help me out. And she did. If it wasn't for Nurse Sullivan that night, I don't think I would have, I probably would have died in that corner by the emergency exit. But she rolled me back to the ER. And I remember there was just a cubicle at the time, and there were patients everywhere, all critical. And I could hear the doctors and anesthesiologists yelling at her and said, "What have you done, Sullivan? This man's in the height of the, excuse me, he was in the AIDS virus, and you've brought him into the hospital, and we don't know how this is being spread, and you've exposed us to this virus." And they started yelling at her, and they didn't want to take care of me. And so she opened up that curtain and she said, I'm gonna take care of you. Not even her floor. So what she did, she came back, brought me a gown, mop, bucket, clean water, soap, cleanse me, excuse me, or clean me off. And she got on her hands and knees and scrubbed all the blood off that floor. And why I say this is such an important part of that night, because back in the late 80s, we assumed that it was either airborne and or spread through blood. So here she is taking care of
Yeah.
me and risking her life, not knowing that I had a perforated viscus, not knowing that I had tuberculosis. And here she is taking care of me. And she was the one that brought me to the OR and made sure that I got at the OR. So to this day, I owe her lots. It's just one of those unsung heroes that even to this day, when we look at COVID and where we are with so many things going around the world, she was that person who went the extra mile to take care of me. And I just am so grateful for that. So I ended up in the OR, and again, we go to phase 2 and what happened. And in itself was just the next part of the nightmare.
Wow. That there's so much in that. That's so much trauma and such a different time, but that's a beautiful story. And
Well,
go ahead.
here's the thing about so many of us who've had near-death experiences, and I hear this every time I travel around the world. Oh, I want to have a near-death experience. I want to be so spiritually attuned like you. They don't realize that what we go through to get to that point, whether it's the car accident, whether it's the stabbing, whether it's the falling off of a mountain, whatever it is, burning, whatever that disaster might have been, in itself is critical. So I think for so many of us, when we come back, it's not what happened to us, though that's pretty grave in itself. What happens to us is we have been saved by the bell, if you will, by the divine. And for me, it was a choice to come back. And I think, starting at the tunnel and the life review and having my conversation with God, again, going back to my consciousness at the moment of where I was at that time in life, I was agnostic. So as I said, so for me, there was so much rolled up into that night looking back. So for those who've had any kind of near-death experience, I think the challenge to come back, considering what we had to go through, and to walk, as brave ambassadors of truth, and to share our message, that in itself deserves some kind of applause because it's tough.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many people are traumatized by not only their experience, but having to readjust. And that's a whole other topic in itself,
Right.
which I've invited my friend Charlie to speak about later because he's a therapist who's going to be doing therapy specifically
Oh.
for near-death experiencers, and it's a whole topic that I think people don't realize. So, at what point, take it from wherever you feel it's appropriate. Did this near-death experience actually occur?
When I was in the operating room, um, we were at the critical stages. I mean, I was in and out of consciousness. I remember hitting that operating table, and I had lost so much weight and so much blood, for the last 4 or 5 months, that when they were putting the IVs in, before we were going to operate, I couldn't hold them. They kept just, they just wouldn't hold. So I do remember when they flipped me over my back, I remember the anesthesiologist said to me, "This is going to hurt." That was the last thing I remember until there was a snap, and then we went silent. It was just, noiseless, soundless. And I remember me, Peter Anthony, looking down at Peter Anthony on the operating table, and I could hear the doctors and the nurses and the anesthesiologist's thoughts in my head. But I'm looking down at me, but I'm up here. And everything kind of went in slow motion. And I knew when they put the shock pedals to my chest, at that moment, I could look down and see my body physically just jump. And then over here in the corner, I could see this, what I call the bullseye, this rotating tunnel. And I was greeted by family members, not my sister, not my brother, not my father, my grandparents, but by people from my past lives. And recognizable, I knew it instantly, and as soon as I saw them, and this sounds a little dramatic, but in those period costumes of that period of time, and I knew exactly who they were. And so they were the first ones to greet me. And as I went through this tunnel, I think the most incredible thing for me, looking back at it, was this sense of peace. And again, you'll hear every person who's gone through the tunnel, this sense of peace, this sense of love, this sense of connected to all, was a part of this particular spinning, rotating tunnel, followed by all these geometric codes and quantum physics and triple codes: 222, 333, 1111, 444, 999, all spinning around me with color that I can't even describe today. And looking back, have been a very gifted artist. There's nothing on a palette of whether it be watercolors or oil paints or even pastels that can compare to the colors that I saw on the other side. So we have math, we have color, and we have sound. The melodic female voices, and I say melodic female voices because who knows, it could have been both, male and female, but it was rather ambiguous. But these voices were hypnotic. It was trance, where kind of guiding me through this tunnel of love. And I was digesting and understanding and accepting. I wasn't questioning, like, what are all these numbers and why am I hearing, these voices, and why all this math? Your consciousness does not go there. What your consciousness does is it accepts. And as you are spinning through this tunnel, your consciousness, your sense of knowledge is expanded. I remember it was though reading the Bible from 0 to 60 seconds and downloading every passage and getting it. Whether it was Einstein or Tesla or Edison, or whoever it was, all that information was being downloaded into my mind, into my consciousness, and getting it and understanding it and digesting it and allowing it to continue. So imagine the mind of Einstein and Tesla and of God, Cherie and Nostradamus, all in your consciousness, your high school English teacher, all that being a part of your experience. And each thing that you're experiencing, you're getting it 1, 2, 3, next. You're getting the colors, you're getting the sound. And then as I'm going through all this, leading to my life review, I remember coming out of this tunnel and I was in the stratosphere. And that's the only thing I can relate to and to your audience, the stratosphere of, just imagine going to the movies and you're the only one there and you've got this big wide screen and it's just you and this wide screen. But I had this matrix of my life, and I'm watching every moment, hearing every decision, every choice, every yes, every no, every critical point, every good point, everything where I didn't shine, every point where I did shine. It was like boom, 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 getting everything, not criticizing Peter, but looking at me as a person and saying, you didn't shine there. I could hear myself, you could have been a little better here, Peter, or that wasn't nice. You shouldn't be doing that. Almost like you being best friend to yourself, having that conversation with self and not crucifying self, but being good to self and understanding that this moment that you're experiencing where you didn't shine, that you could have done better. And so that to me was freeing because there is no judgment. On the other side, we as humans, as humankind, we judge, we have prejudices, we put into categories. You're Hispanic, you're gay, you're Jewish, you're not Christian, and whatever it is, we tend to put all these subcultures into little boxes, and we don't vibrate to that because they're foreign to our consciousness. Well, there is no gay, there is no straight, there is no white, there is no black, there is no Muslim or Christian on the other side. There's only love. And that's it. And so when you understand that, and when you're watching your life review, and it comes to you as an understanding that this is nothing more than love, and you should learn to love self, then you come to the table with better choices. And that's what I was experiencing. So life review in itself was amazing. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we can go down another rabbit hole of that, but there were a lot of choices I could have done better with. And I think for me, seeing those choices where I didn't shine, when I did come back, I remember coming back connected to Earth, how important it was for me to be environmentally aware, being connected to the animal kingdom, because what I saw on the other side was the cruelty, not only to dogs and cats and to horses, but to every creature on this planet by man. And what I learned on the other side, and this is very important because no one talks about this, our animal kingdom, dog, cat, wolf, lion, elephant, giraffe, alligator, everything is connected to source. Everything is connected to God. Everything that has breath is connected to God. And so when one of us or many of us destroy something that is already perfectly aligned, we in itself are negating consciousness. And that also means by us sitting back and doing nothing. So when I came back, my choice to be an advocate of the animal kingdom is very engraved in my heart. When I go out and see how people are, an example where I'm living here in Palm Springs, and how they're just cutting down the trees and the shrubs and to build progress. Everything's all about greed. Everything's about building better and number one. That doesn't resonate with my consciousness. So my thing is the animal kingdom. I'm very connected to the animal kingdom. And that just doesn't mean dogs, cats, and horses. Yes, that is important to me. but the coyote, the hawk, the canary, whatever it might be that I'm running across, the rabbit, every time I'm out in Mother Nature, I realize that God has given me an opportunity to be connected to it. And that to me is where church is. The power of
Amen.
God is right there in nature. And we overlook that. We're so connected to our iPhones and our computers and our iPads, and we got to get this meeting and we got to get that fax. And my boss wants me there at 9 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. We're so used to run, 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 go, 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 and always looking at our phone, not looking at Mother Nature. So when I came back, there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't look at Mother Nature. Every day I get up and I ride my bike 15, 20 miles, and I go out into the mountains onto the dry riverbed, and I spend that time honoring God because I'm alive every day.
Oh, how beautiful.
Yeah. So I say that with great passion. You can see that is important to me. But not only was it the animal kingdom, but the choices we made as a collective consciousness, putting people in positions of power who really didn't represent our consciousness, didn't care about who we were. They cared about the dollars, and they cared about the vote, and they cared about lining their pocketbooks. So we have to be very careful with leadership, because putting people in positions of power, and we've seen so much throughout the many years, it's important that we choose people that care and
Yeah.
not people who care about their pocketbooks. So the selfishness of the political world that I saw on the other side, and there was a lot, and working at CBS and seeing these people coming into the green room afterwards, after post near death, and being able to see the truth of these politicians and these people who were in positions of power, it was very difficult for me not to speak up. So as I said, so I learned very quickly to speak to those ears who got my message, because there were a lot of people who didn't care, didn't want to hear it. And so for me, it was a time of coming back with a whole new reality. But I do want to bring something up that's very important. Not only did I see where we were politically back then and where we were going for years, but I also saw numerology codes and numbers that I'm writing about in my next book that at the time I thought were these unusual codes, turned out to be, in this last year when we were locked down, as I began to do research as a numerologist, I began to see that these codes that I saw on the other side were cures for leukemia and COVID and cancer and MS. And I saw these numbers and I thought, oh my God, this is what this is all about. And so when we're in a meditative state and we understand how the grids in the body work from the head chakra all the way down to the base chakra, everything that happened to me in that near death tunnel, math, sound, and color. So if you stop and think about this, if we had to communicate with an entity from the other side, ET, how would we do it? We do it through math, we do it through sound, and we do it through color. And I think Spielberg had it so on with Close Encounters of the Third Kind
Oh, yeah.
at the top of that mountain. And that, looking back at that, meaning back during lockdown, made a lot of sense to me. So it was like, aha moment. That's why it happened to me. So that sound, that color, that math all started evolving around during that near death tunnel. And it's taken me how many years to finally understand what these codes meant. So
Yeah.
being a numerologist and astrologer as a part of my new experience, coming back with this information, I just began to research and began to digest and understand every number means something. And if you want to just break it down to a simple mantra, math is an exact science. 1 + 1 = 2. We're not going to go to the number 37. And everything in numerology is about an exact number adding up to an exact number. The same thing with astrology. So when I did come back from this experience on the other side, the first thing I did when I got my vision back, I was blind for many months due to the medications. And I also couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair for a while. But once all those things began to leave me and I started healing my body, the first thing I did was started reading simple books on numerology. Did I have those codes back then? Absolutely not. So I started from ground zero with basic numerology and graduated to different levels of numerology until 7 years later, I was doing codes, trying to understand why the 1111 occurred to me so often. And looking back at that, I died on November the 11th at 11:11 p.m. in operating room 11, celebrating my birthday.
Wow.
So that impact moment that you have, not only on your birthday as an anniversary, but you have all that kind of simultaneously playing in your near-earth experience, all these different codes in 1111. And all you have to do, audience, is Google those who see 1111 or the triple codes 333 or 444 or 777. Millions and millions of people began to see these codes in the late 90s and more so in the 2000s. And as a numerologist, there were no information, there were no books on these codes. So I had to learn how to get to compound codes. In other words, 1 through 9 is a basic number. And then you had to go 10, 11, all the way to the different double digits. And then the compound numbers, which were important numbers. An example like 11 in numerology is a master number, 22 is a master number, 33, a master number, 44, etc. And then you had the karmic numbers like the 13, the lucky 13 or the unlucky 13. I had to learn all about that slowly, methodically, until I understood every number. And so that's how I, if you want to call it the gift, that has helped me throughout my career, it's been math. And in college and high school, that was the
I know.
last thing. No, I'm creative, I'm an artist. Math, I could care less about. So that ability as an artist left me. I was a skilled artist. I could paint, sculpt, build, you name it, caricatures, all vanished, just left me. My speech impediment left me. I came back as a new person. I now can use both hands. Everything who I was as a person not only changed with me physically, but changed with me spiritually and emotionally. So for me, there was this new Peter Anthony that came back as a whole new person. I was reborn.
That's so fascinating. And I want to know because it must have been scary to wake up from that. Well, I don't know how you felt and how you processed that, but waking up with no vision, for example, or I don't know if you woke up that way, you must have had still some fear around what
Well,
does this look like now?
yeah. Thank you for asking that question because this is critical. So I remember coming back to my physical body after my near-death experience, and I remember hitting my body. I remember that. I remember the pain. It was as though I was smacked into my body, and I could smell the drugs flowing through my bloodstream. I could taste the toxicity of the medications and the morphine, the prednisone, all these different medicines. I knew exactly what was going on in my body. And I remember looking up, and I remember Doctor, I can't say his name, but looking down at me and was trying to get my attention. And I remember he said, "Can you hear me, Mr. Anthony? We almost lost you." There was no, we did lose you. We almost lost you.
Yeah.
Um,
They don't even know.
but I remember waking up, and what little bit of vision I did have, I could see the auras of people, the nurses, the interns, the doctors, the people walking down the hallway. I could see their auras, and I didn't know why I was seeing that. I just, back then they said it was the drugs. But I could see that. But not only could I see their auras, I could hear their thoughts whispering in their head. And I came back excited. And like some eager little teenager, I talked about my near death, like Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. I saw the Wicked Witch and the monkeys flew out of the castle. I mean, I was so excited to talk about my near death experience and talk about God, who I really didn't care about before near death experience, and was so enamored with my conversation with God, and so enamored with what I saw on the other side and prophecies, what I started talking about to the doctor. I just couldn't stop talking. And I could hear a nurse, "This guy's a nut job," and them looking at me as though I was crazy. It just, and that was where it started, because that journey of people not listening to us, for many of us back in the 80s and the 90s, they just didn't care. You didn't talk about a near-death experience. It was kind of very closed communities, and you might, did you die? Did you see God? It was so hush hush, and you had to make sure that obviously who you were sharing this information with, certainly not my coworkers, that you felt safe. And so I say to those who've had near-death experiences, and so many have not come out of the closet with it, that was my challenge. I learned on the other side to listen to my aha, my truth. And in the first 7 years, I listened to the doctors, I listened to the ministers, I listened to the people that were supposedly the experts. but no one listened to me. So I had to go inward, and I had to study, and I had to kind of revamp my whole world. Imagine coming back and seeing corruption and seeing greed and seeing corrupt politics and seeing people kill the animal kingdom, and then coming back and watching people in the operating room, excuse me, in the hospitals. And when I eventually got back to work and seeing the truth of these people, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
And who do you share it with when people don't believe? So the loneliness of that information in itself was a struggle,
And we
and
didn't
so for
have
me, it
internet.
was like, what do you do with this?
Yeah, like back then we didn't have computers and internet. And so you didn't just Google who else has had this experience.
You went to the library.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
The Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah. And then as fate would have it, I always say, for every conflict, there's a miracle. It took me 7 years to process, and I just stopped talking about it. I thought I went to every priest, I went to every minister, men and women of the cloth, you name it, psychiatrist, therapist, you name it. I was just trying to get proof, so I wouldn't feel like I was crazy. And no one supported. I had a girlfriend at the time that believed me. I had my own personal doctor that believed me, and Nurse Sullivan. That was it. But that's all I needed. It only takes one person. And so I built my whole new world on those three people, and slowly went out into the world with a message. And I knew what happened to me, and I was not going to stand away from that. So eventually I found the right people. And so here's something to your audience. Because I had studied numerology and astrology for 7 years, and when I say I studied, I mean I immersed myself, because I had no life. I went to work, I worked out, and I went home. That was it. In complete isolation, complete loneliness. I really wanted someone, as a group or as a friend or something. We didn't even have, the near-death association groups back then. I just wanted someone to hear me, and that didn't happen. So as it goes, I got a phone call from a homicide detective, and they were working on a case that involved numerology, and working on a case that the victim they discovered on the crime scene, or at the scene, who had been killed, was the special effects. So obviously I was the right candidate, right? Now, I had never worked with the police department before. I had never gone forward with my intuitive knowledge to help anyone else. So I had to go test the psychic with this policeman, or this homicide detective, in an empty parking lot behind Barnes and Noble.
Wait, and how did they get in? How did they know to call you?
Referred by a bookstore, because I
Oh,
would go into the bookstore and was always buying numerology books. And
oh,
obviously
right,
people in the metaphysical bookstores you'd have conversations with.
right.
And this lady that I spoke with several times at work there was a great fan of mine, because I was so gifted at numerology, and she referred them to me. You see how things line up?
Yes.
So that's how it all began for me. And I had to go test the psychic. I had gotten his car, and this unmarked car, and it was test the psychic. And I said, again, and to this day, it still happens. And back then, especially in the 90s, the police were not really working with psychics as to work on resolving cases. So I was kind of behind the scenes, and this one detective believed in me. He was so amazed at my knowledge of numerology. So he brought me to the crime scene. And I won't go into it because it's very gory, but it turned out to be someone who, what they thought was the victim, turned out to be the murderer. And I was able to
Wow.
help him solve this case against every odd against me, from the CSI to the other detectives to the police, who also, and I go back to something very important here. I could hear their thoughts and what they thought of me. And so I had to stand in my truth and just go with what I knew I was seeing. And I could see the boys' spirits who were communicating with me while I was on the crime scene of what happened. So I've learned throughout the years how to divide the reality and the physical world into another dimension. And I learned that when I got into television, and how to become a paranormal investigator while I'm working on an unsolved case or paranormal case, and working with the director or camera guy and the AD or a producer. And while they're talking to me, I had to learn how to split consciousness. And to this day, that's what I do.
Did you figure that out just Trial and error, kind of like the
trial and
way.
error.
Yeah, I was gonna say as a medium, I learned to be I learned to develop my mediumship skills, and someone's like, "But how did you learn it?" I'm like, "By being wrong." I mean, by practicing reading people. That's the only way
Hmm.
you learn the feelings, and it's a learning a language. And so I wondered how you perceived the souls involved in these cases, for example, or and how you perceived them, and also how you perceived the telepathy. Was it just like when we do mediumship, where it's not? Do you actually, you Peter, actually see them with your naked eye, or is yeah? That's what I wondered.
And so there in itself, your statement, your question is loaded. So I'll try to
Yeah,
answer as best as
absolutely.
possible. First of all, let's go back to the doctors, the nurses, and the therapists and the
Yeah.
ministers of both men and women of the cloth. I learned that their opinions were their opinions.
Hmm.
So I was already skilled at 7 years of people denying me my truth. So when I started believing in self and believing in this power and believing this gift, when spirit showed up, and I mean the ghost showed up, and I learned to work with the ghost, I listened to them versus the policeman.
Yeah.
So because they were there, they weren't, so you have to, and then people, oh, here's your imagination. No, when you're getting a vision or you're having a strong intuitive feeling and you just know,
Yep.
your heart is never wrong.
Yeah.
Your intuition is never wrong. We've all been down there as spiritual people when we've gone down that to that wrong party, or we've gone out on that wrong date, and our little voice is screaming, "Get out of here, leave now!" That is your inner voice speaking to you. I learned that was the greatest gift that was given to me, to listen to my inner self, and it never ever led me down the wrong path. What led me down the wrong path was my logic.
Yep.
What led me down the right path was my intuition, was my heart. So by the time the police and detectives and all them came along, I had one detective who believed, and I had the entire ensemble of police or law officers who didn't believe in anything. So I went with spirit, and I went with this one homicide detective who believed in my gift, and he opened up the doors to sightings. At that time back in the 90s was the #1 television series with UFOs and ghost experiences. And again, I landed on this just by mere accident, and that led me to other shows. And I mean, and here I am, as I said, working front and center as on camera personality, working on paranormal cases that took place back in the turn of the century or the 1940s during World War II, or going to where a murder happened on a creek or in a cave. And here I am having to go back into that period of time and trusting spirit world to guide me. And then you add the Hollywood effect of the boo effect, to scare and creep people out with that. I think that's why so many people are so scared of me as a paranormal investigator who have had a near-death experience, coming back and sharing my gift. It's a gift from God. I'm not here to do anything but help spirit. And if you understand anything about the near death world, they haven't gone to the white light. They've not gone through the tunnel. And so when I show up, what they see, if you understand how the grids work on the body, I am showing the yellow aura, the solar plexus. There's a bright light coming out from me, physically, if you will.
Mhm.
And spirit world is seeing that bright light. So they are attracted to that person. And that's how they start communicating. And you start this dialogue back and forth here. And what happens where you lose the connection is when you begin to doubt. You
Mhm.
go back to logic. We go back to left brain. 1 and 1 equals 2. This does not make sense. It dissipates. So once you learn to stay in their world, not my world, but their world, and listen to their story, to their side of the story, their drama, whatever may have happened, they want to get to the light. Now, I add something else that's really important. People say, "Oh, it's demonic. Oh, it's cursed. Oh, it's."
Mhm.
They just have so much information, right? Everyone all of a sudden is a paranormal expert. It's very simple. We're here for love, light, and to help each other. And the spirit world needs to get to the other side, just like the rest of us. So when I identify myself as a ghost chaplain, that's all I'm doing. I'm just giving a helping hand to those lost souls. Now, are there demonic experiences? Absolutely. Is there evil? Absolutely. We've seen that. How many have I worked on? One. In my
Yeah.
many years, as a ghost chaser, as a psychic detective. I've had one, and it was pretty bad.
I just heard a friend of mine and I talk about this a lot. She's Christian and I'm spiritual. And she's like, "Do you?" Because I kind of said, I only believe what I know from experience. And she said, "Well, do you not believe in, Satan?" And I'm like, "I don't have any experience with an entity called Satan. I I don't know what I think." And for a while I was like, I don't think I do believe in evil spirits. Now I think that I do. But the question that she had for me was sort of, how can you not believe it? I said, because I haven't experienced it. But Matt Frazier, the medium, the other night said in one of his videos, which I loved, because I said, I haven't experienced it as a medium. I only, it's light and love. And I ask for that. And he said his opinion about it is that if you are love and light, you're not necessarily going to attract, they can't meet you where you are at that level. That's
Absolutely.
why you're safe as long as he's like, obviously if you're summoning, it's a different thing, but I don't feel scared at all about attachments. I mean, but I'd love to hear all of, I mean, we could go on for hours about it and I won't make you do that, but I would love to hear sort of, yeah, your take on that, because I just don't feel in danger of a negative attachment by doing mediumship work.
Well, I think for me, and I think this will make sense to your audience, and it will make sense to you. Everything was frequency.
Yeah.
Think about that. Okay. So I show up on a crime scene my first time, and there's been a murder there. Now, when I was on the other side, I go back to sound, I go back to math, I go back to color. These basic ingredients, this formula that I saw on the other side has been how I solve crime, whether it be a crime or in a relationship. It's a homework assignment. So I
Right.
have the first responding officer. I also have the victim. I also have the suspect. I have their birthdays, their full names. And I also look at an address.
Yeah.
So everything comes back to mathematical equations. So when I show up to work on a case, they're all looking at me like, I'm scribbling down, and they're looking at, my numbers, 11 and 16 and 33 and 426 and, different numbers and longitudes and latitudes, and then the birthdays. And they're like, "What are you doing?" Well, it makes sense to me because,
Yeah.
as I said, that's how I solve things, is through math. It's an exact science.
Interesting.
And so, as I said, go back to birthdays, go back to the first responding officer, go back to the time of death, go back to the victim, go back to the suspect. All these things become a part of my equation, and then it leads me to the ultimate decision. Now,
Right.
back to something that I think is important here. Um, I think that if you are in a world of love and light and kindness, what I've learned to do is, the more quiet I become, and the more time I find myself in a quiet space, where you call it meditation or just downloading quietness, I have found that the more I stay in a quiet place, the more I up the volume of my energy field.
Yeah.
And so there's this other side of the world that so many are not seeing. I have come back with heightened senses. So I kind of relate myself to an Alaskan wolf in the middle of winter, who's stalking its prey, and every branch that cracks, every bird that chirps, every footprint that comes from its prey, it hears, as do I. So everything around me is heightened. So when I show up to work on a case, everything around me is heightened. And the other thing I know is that if I'm actually working on a real haunting, and there are many that don't work out, ghosts always appear to me the night before, and they wake me up, and they're at the foot of my bed. And so I've learned to listen to them, and they don't go wrong, because they're showing me another side of the world, their world. They're taking me back into a time of their murder, of their suicide, their untimely death. They're showing me. And so here's how I explain it to your audience. So imagine you're watching the Game of Thrones, and you've already seen the scene. So you got your DVR player, and you're speeding through your DVR control player, or your DVR remote control, and you're seeing all these images flash before you. Well, I do the very same thing. All I'm doing is flash, 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 forward, forward, forward. I can see what's going on. And then I get to the point where I need to stop and listen to. And so what happens, the more gifted you become in your trusting self, your inner self, when they present you information, and sometimes it's rather odd, it's rather erratic, it's kind of mind-boggling. You listen. I worked on a case this past, before COVID, was 2020, 2019, and my first negative entity. And when I showed up, and this was July 4th, and we went there kind of sneaking on crew to get just some outside shots. We were doing some exterior shots just to see kind of what we're going against. And there was nothing going on. I didn't get a sense of anything. And then at 8 o'clock that night, we were all having dinner, and then he appeared to me at the dinner table. And he said, "Go to 13." And I was like, "What? Go to 13?" I had no idea what he was talking about. I told the producers, I said, "I need to leave now. I'm being called." And I walked around the grounds until I found suite number 13 or room number 13.
Oh, okay.
And there he was. So that's what I said, though, you get this cryptic information, and your job is to not to doubt it. Go back to the near-death tunnel. You allow, you accept, and you are guided by spirit. And that's what I've done throughout my many years. I listen to them, and you trust. I won't go into the gore of what happened because it was pretty grueling and pretty frightening. But it was the only case I've worked on that was, I look back at, and it kind of freaked me out.
Right.
Now,
was the oh, go ahead. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go. You ask your
I did
question.
want to ask about that. I don't know if this particular entity or soul was the soul involved, but I guess the question is it the soul that's inherently evil, or is it the circumstance surrounding the soul that
Okay.
creates the
So
negative energy?
thank you. It's an excellent question. And thank you for bringing this up. No one has done this. So I appreciate that question. It's a brilliant question. So I'm going to use Rasputin. I'm going to use Caesar. I'm going to use Adolf Hitler. So suppose Caesar and Rasputin was nothing more than Adolf Hitler. We come back, and I go back to the tunnel. I was greeted by past lives from 15, 16, 17, 1800s. And so as we reincarnate, the whole purpose of reincarnation is to elevate one's consciousness, to elevate one's soul purpose. And if you've come back and you're not doing so, evil is to become less evil, and to constantly throughout its, I guess, its rebirth or coming into its next level of lifetime, is to up the consciousness. And if they fail to do so, then evil becomes evil. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So when you have an example, I've always said, and everyone laughs at me, I believe in my heart that Joan of Arc became Queen Elizabeth I, became Princess Di.
Interesting.
And so when you look at these women, iconic figures throughout history, and you start seeing similarities in their numerology birth charts, and they've come back with the same lessons and come back as women against the church and against, its own parliament, and still stand in their truth. So think about this. Joan of Arc said, "I answer to no one but God." Queen Elizabeth said, "I answer to no one but England." Princess Di said, "I answer to no one but myself."
Oh, wow.
Progress of self.
Yeah.
So if, many people will disagree with me. So when we go back to evil, if evil doesn't transform itself, evil comes back as evil.
I've never heard that before, and that's so interesting.
So let's look at something else. Obama, felt connected to Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Tall, lanely senators from that area of the USA, right? There was some kind of connection. Now, whether he was Lincoln himself or whether he worked with Lincoln, who knows? But there's a strong connection there. And he came back with the same values, and he just motivated so many different people. But the other thing too, like Lincoln, he came into this world with an authentic message. And when you have an authentic message, you will get an authentic audience. And so therefore, the ultimate lesson for all of us, mankind, both gave us hope. They
Right.
gave us understanding. They gave us a new way of doing things. So, and we go back to something, I just said, it's nothing more than in every lifetime you come back to evolve.
Yeah.
And as a collective consciousness, and I go back to COVID, we were shut down, but look at what happened on the positive side. I remember here, and you've lived in Los Angeles, the 405 freeway, the 10, the 101, the Mixmaster of downtown Los Angeles, there was no traffic because we were shut down. There was no pollution. And you had all these young teenagers on skateboards on the 405 and on the 10 freeway and the 101 downtown on their skateboards, just happy as lark. There was no pollution on the beach. There were no jet streams in the sky. And the other area too that was important to me was in West Hollywood. You had all these people going on the balconies and saying hello to their neighbors across the street. And the same thing in Italy, and the same thing in Berlin. We found ways to find hope, And so as I said, so through every conflict, there's always hope. And so as I said, when I was on the other side, that was a great lesson for me. Through everything that we go through every step, through every lonely path, through every criticism, through everything, we're constantly evolving to perfect the soul. And so if you understand that, and it applies to everyone, including the spirit world, then my job is to show up and to help, to be of assistance. That's all.
That's such an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
I've always been the type, I always kind of thought that we're all souls and that souls are pure inherently. The ball of light that comes from God is pure light. And I've said this 1,000 times on this podcast, but it's and I always thought of it as we are corrupted by indoctrination, trauma, mental illness. Like those are the reasons why human beings corrupt that light. And then there are people that believe in pure dark energy, and that's why this person is evil. This person's a sociopath because, whereas I've always looked at it as a pure soul, but they're in a body that has their amygdala is shaped differently, and therefore they're a sociopath. I don't know why that is. So, and of course, I don't know all the answers, but then I also see evidence, especially when witnessing people, and I've used a spirit box before, and never had a negative experience with it, but I've gone, well, that has to be an evil present, a negative energy coming in, because no spirit would talk like that. That's just negative dark energy. So I've always had just a curiosity and also a confusion a little bit about, are we all souls are pure, they're corrupted when we become human, and then but what is that dark energy source, and where does that come from? And is there, how they talk about there's God and then there's Satan, which is that's one belief. And I'm like, I just don't see it as that. I kind of want to say black and white, but what do you think about
Well,
that?
so there's I can go
I
down
know
many
there's,
rabbit holes with this, so I'll just
yeah.
talk and see where it goes. First of all, when you're on the other side, and we go back to gay and straight and Christian versus Muslim versus all that, there's none of that. There's nothing but love. There's nothing but kindness. And there's this overwhelming sense of to be of service. That's what you come back with. That's it. We live in a very complex world, but the bylaws of God, universe, the ascended masters, and I do believe in all that, are simple: love, kindness. We're here to help. That's it. And where we get lost along the way is through media. I talked about the boo effect from Hollywood. So we've been conditioned to believe that everything that's haunted is bad because that's ratings. That's scare our audience, and we can bring in X amount of millions of dollars. It's, you have to kind of like dig through all that stuff and find your own truth. We all know within self when we're doing something that's not right, when we're in a relationship that's not right, when we are being mistreated by a boss, that's not right. Our aha right here, the solar plexus pings us and says, this is not serving you. Where we get caught up, and I'm guilty of this, is by the opinions of those people who are the experts. It was difficult for me to come out of the closet with my near-earth experience because the doctors, the priests, and the ministers, and the therapists said no. So they were the legal experts. They were the the practitioners of medicine, they knew, I didn't. I was just, some kid that had a near-death experience. No, you have to understand, these near-death experiences happen to us because we have come back during a time now that's critical, where we are seeing, failed leadership in our politics and our churches. We're seeing the failed systems of our education system, of our obviously the pharmaceutical companies and the World Health Organization. There's so much doubt around us. We don't know what road to navigate. And so I think why near-death experiences become forward now is because our rules, or the bylaws we learn on the other side, are simple: love, kindness, and to give a helping hand. And that's it. There's nothing else. You're not here to judge. You're not here to condemn. You're not here to take their piece of pie away from them, though that's certainly what's happening here in this collective world. So I think what's important right now is to keep it simple. With me, I lost my sight. So every day when I go out and take my 15-mile bike ride, I'm able to see the mountains. Thank you, God, for allowing me to see. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. The doctors basically said, we don't know when you're going to be able to walk again. For some reason, you've had all these horrible reactions to all the medications, the prednisone. I should not have had, 3 weeks of prednisone, have crippling arthritis, but it did. I learned back then, looking back at that, you've come back from a new world as a near-death experiencer, and they are cramming your body with all these toxic medications. Why would my body not respond? I came back, as I said, as a new birth spirit on this planet, a walk-in, whatever you want to call it. And here they were just feeding my body with all these toxins. And so, of course, I had a reaction to all these medications. It was me who weaned myself off the pain pills and the morphine and the prednisones and the cortisone drugs and the sulfur drugs. I learned from the other side to listen to the spirits of the doctors who would come to me on my bed while I was recovering, and they would tell me how to wean off the medications. So my girlfriend at the time would come in, and we would take the medications, especially the prednisones and the morphines, and we would just basically put it aside. And I would say, okay, so I need pure garlic, I need pure aloe vera juice, I need berry, I need hackle, I need what was the other one? Thistleberry, all these different things. These doctors were telling me what to do, so I weaned myself off the horrible medications a little bit, and then started implementing all these homeopathic remedies. And I started learning to visualize a healthy body, being able to see again, being able to walk again. That became a part of my new diet for Peter Anthony. And I remember my doctor said, you'll never walk again. I remember he said, you have 3 months to live. It was all this negative. And I thought, well, while I was on the other side, that's not what I saw. I saw myself traveling around the world, speaking and writing and doing radio interviews and TV interviews and spreading a message of hope. So I had to learn how to, okay, that's your opinion,
Yeah.
but that's not how I see it. So I remember when the doctor said, we don't know what we're going to do, about your legs. We cannot get any movement back in your legs. It was just this whole, doom and gloom. But I remember I said to him, I will walk out of this hospital. I will walk out of this hospital. I was there, 3-4 months later. And I remember the day I checked out. Now, did I walk? No, I hobbled. But I had a best friend and had my girlfriend there. I was on their shoulders, and my legs, as weak as they were somewhat walking. And I looked at that doctor at the elevator. I said, you see, I'm walking. And that's what it took for me. It took that one moment of believing that I could walk again. That was the moment in my life that said, you can do this. You can do this. And if it weren't for Nurse Sullivan coming to my house and taking care of me off the clock, and her daughter Patty doing the same thing, coming over and bathing me. I didn't have any family. There's only so much that friends can do for you. So if it weren't for Nurse Sullivan and her daughter Patty, I don't know what I would have done. So you see, so you go back and you honor those who helped you. And so every day I go back on my bike ride. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Betty, for all those great things you did for me. Thank you for my friends who helped me during that critical time in my life. Thank you, God, for letting me see. Thank you, God. I can't run anymore like I used to, but I get on my bike. And so when I'm around the mountains and the creeks and the dry riverbed, so funny, during COVID, I walk, drive on my bicycle, and people were just down and depressed. I go, hey, have a great day. And everywhere I went on my bicycle. And so I got this name called Peter the Meter Reader. And I was the guy who would bring smiles to their faces. And that became a part of this is great. Let's go see what God has in store for me. And I went on my bicycle and I went everywhere, just to the parks and to the bridges, and just, hello, have a great day. And people would look for me. And so we began to shift consciousness. And people say to me all the time, well, I live in Berlin, or I live in Scotland, or I live in the middle of Tennessee, and there's no one that's enlightened here. You may be that only person that is enlightened. So it is your job to spread light. And so that's what I did. I'm not going to let these doctors and especially during that whole political mishap that was going on with the drink on the plate. It was like, what are we doing here? You keep it simple and you just come from a place of love. And that sounds so airy-fairy. I get that. But if you're coming from a place of love, you're elevating your chakras.
Yeah.
And you're connecting to spirit world. And why would not God provide the people in your life to bring smiles to? It's just, I look at it this way, and you might get this, being in the television film industry. You and I are experiencing our own mini movie. And those extras and those day players and those principal players, can change at any moment. But that movie without the extras and those day players and the principal players would not be as important if we didn't have them. So imagine the Lord of the Rings, if we didn't have the orcs attacking the castle and we just didn't do that. We got rid of them. And that's why we didn't have the love affair between the elf and the human. We got rid of that. There would not have been that impact moment. So everything in our life, every moment, every person, every connection you make, every second of your life is a gift. So you're talking to someone who couldn't see, you're talking to someone who couldn't walk, and you're talking to someone who was given 3 months to live. I'm still here.
Wow.
And as long as I can live on this planet and do something good, and maybe that one person I talked to today is the person that needs me the most. Mm-hmm. And they go home and talk to their husband, and he goes, oh, wow, that's how we shift consciousness. We don't do it by watching the news. We don't do it by listening to politicians who are guiding us down the wrong path. We do it with our heart and what works with us. Listen to your heart. Listen to your inner knowing. It's never wrong. And that's how I lead my life. Love, kindness, and helping other people. And why would I not continue to grow? And why would the universe not bring me abundant things? If you're grateful for the smallest things in life, and the universe brings you great things in life, I'm humbled by that. So I have a whole different outlook of life. I'm glad to be here. I really am. I'm glad to do an interview with you, because to me, it's like, wow, what a great way to connect with another person who's evolved another place in the United States, where you and I come together, where two or more gather, come together and speak truth. We shift consciousness, and no telling who's going to listen to this, and they go, oh, that makes sense. So you and I are important.
Yeah.
So
I think that's true. That you don't even realize the
get on my
small effect
bandwagon
you
here. I
have.
don't mean to be preachy teachy, but that's how I
Oh,
feel.
no, I love it. I think that's important. I think that it's those little things. And I realized, that I had seen this good news thing on Instagram, might have been Good News Movement, just about how just when you walk by someone and say, hey, you look beautiful today. And people would just people would go, well, thank you. And I realized I do that I've always done that just inherently, because I'm just a effusive type of person who likes to connect. But if you say that to, maybe someone's having a bad day and you didn't know it, and maybe you said, you know what, you look beautiful today, or you seem like a lovely person, or just a thank you. Whenever I talk to customer service, they always say, how can, is there anything else I can help you with? I say, yeah, you can have a beautiful day. And I always say, and don't let anyone bring you down. Don't let anyone's negative attitude bring you down. And, if that made them have a better evening when they went home, and they carry that to their kids or their partner or whatever, and then maybe they, you don't, not that that's why we do it. I do it genuinely and without thought, but
you come from an authentic place.
yeah.
And I go back to that movie. Today, your movie, responsibility, your main character today, that scene you have is with that person who's working at the pharmacy, or that person who has had 40 bad customers on cable that day, and you're that one shiny person that comes in and makes them feel good. You see, that's how you shift consciousness. Yes, they're going to have 40 bad customers, and all of a sudden you come in and you're the light at the end of the day. I cannot tell you how many times talking to cable where I've had that nasty agent, I thought, okay, Peter, 5, 4, 3, 2, just bring your best out. And then that conversation just goes down another path. You
Yeah.
know, I had something to do with Amazon across the globe here, and with this guy from the Philippines whose name was Tom. That was his American name,
Yeah.
and there was a breakdown in communication. But we started talking, and we were going over the account and what have you. And then he recognized who I was, and he started talking to me. He went out and bought my book, and he wrote a
Wow.
review on Amazon. And
Wow.
so you said, so you don't know that moment in life that comes along is your moment to connect with someone way over the other part of the planet. And you are that light, and he is that light, and your light comes together, explodes. Again, shifting consciousness. And so for me, there is not a day that it doesn't go by that I say, okay, God, let's go see what you have planned for me today. And by me saying that, I know that every person is my homework assignment that I come across. That's it. So how do I make that a great special moment? And
Yeah.
you're that person for me today. Because tomorrow when I get up and do my bike ride and I go to the dry river bed, I'll be saying, thank you so much, Shannon, for being a part of my day yesterday on Wednesday. That means the world to me. And may your world be filled with happiness and greatness. And may all those things that you desire come to your doorstep. Amen. And you keep it simple and you go to the next person. I do this every anniversary on 11/11. I go off somewhere and I do my gratitude. I do my homework assignment of where I didn't shine for that last year, those moments of talking to the cable guy, or maybe I had an incident with a neighbor, or who knows what may have happened. And I go down and I ask for forgiveness of those things. I do an inventory, a strong, thorough inventory of those things where I didn't shine. Then I do my projections. Thank you, God. I would love to be able to work on more radio interviews and get the message across. I would like to travel more and be able to go in and talk to different people all around the planet. In your name, I ask, Amen. And I 11/11 to 11/29, I do that because when 11/29 is when they came in and said to me that I may not walk again or may not be able to see again. And here I am, walking and talking and seeing and sharing a message. So you know what I said? So we can do one or two things. It goes back to choice. And I learned on the other side, do you want to go back? The voice said to me, do you want to go back? I was given a choice to come back. Yes. And here I am. And here you are. And here we are together talking about something that many years ago, the doctors and the ministers and the men and women of the cloth, the priest said would not happen, and that I needed to shut my mouth and go about my day and not make any waves. I don't live like that anymore, nor should any of us. I've learned to walk in my truth. I've learned to speak my truth, and I try to say it as best as I can. And if those ears and eyes don't get it, that's okay, because someone over here might. And that's the person I'm connecting with, not the person who says, no, that didn't happen. I don't believe that. And this person goes, oh my God, it happened to my mother. I'm going to connect with that person. So understand where your piece of pie is. My piece of pie is not over here with the naysayer. My piece of pie is over someone who has experienced it firsthand and knows about it and may be seeking answers. And so that's my homework assignment, to connect from heart to heart with that person.
And that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So we could go on for hours and hours, but I do want to, that was such a beautiful way to wrap it up. I mean, I could go down 20 more rabbit holes, but I think we will. Whether we do this again or you and I just talk, behind the scenes, but I do want to give you the opportunity to share what's coming up for you, anything you'd like to share about projects that you can talk about, and what services that you're providing at the
Well,
moment.
first of all, I am a numerologist and astrologer, and I do an Akashic reading, and it's a 2-hour reading. And it helps people to find out why they're here. People think they're here because of money, and they think they're here because of relationships, and those are all peripheral things. Yeah, those are great and wonderful. But before you come into this particular frame of life, you've chose your authentic purpose. I cannot tell you how many actors should have been accountants, and how many accountants should have been actors, and how many people should have been singers, or this person should have been a counselor. Sometimes we get into the wrong career. So my thing that I'm really good at doing is helping people find their authentic career. And then with that, their authentic purpose. Because I think if you love what you do and do what you love, why would you not be serving on this planet? So I teach people that. I'm working on can't talk about it too much, but I am working on something that's pretty incredible. It's a docu-series. And I'm taking numerology as a stepping point of how media and politics have basically influenced us and how it affected our pop culture.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So that's something I'm working on with some producers right now, and we love it. My next book, The Accidental Prophet, will be coming out. I'm short of 100 pages from completion. My current book, Keymaster, and my website is www.theaccidentalprophet.com. Just go into my website and look at every show I've done, every paranormal show I've worked on, every article I've written. I'm very proud of the fact that for many years I was denied by the medical industry, and yet Johns Hopkins during COVID had me write an article about my near-death experience.
Oh, wow.
So on the anniversary of June 4th, 1987. So if that's not a sort of a thing ting from the universe, what is? So I realized, wow, you just never know how things can come full circle. And I had reached a point of, I think for so many of us who've gone through this, full circle.
Yeah.
As I said, I look back at those doctors and nurses and the men and women who called through denied. And all of a sudden it was kind of, not that it was anything of to build my ego and say, yes, I did it.
Right.
But as a pat on the back, you believed in yourself and you kept going. So, I would like to say to the audience, you guys, we are persuaded by the wrong events, sometimes the wrong choices, especially the wrong people. Choose wisely. Choose wisely. Look around you. And if you're not happy, you'll know it right here. If you're in the wrong relationship, you have a choice to get out of that relationship. If you're in the wrong career, you have a choice to get out of that career. Find what you love. And once I found this world and I started connecting with, forensic experts and scientists and other detectives, I was like, wow. And, many people had near-death experiences as well. So we were all like, little children who had climbed up the mountain at different points of life. But I always say, when we get to the top of the mountain, no matter what journey we've taken, once we get to the top of that mountain, the vista is always spectacular. It really is. So my way, your way, whatever way you get to the top of the mountain, we all share that common ingredient of awe.
I just want to stand up and me and my cats stand up and give you a standing ovation for everything that you just said. And I want to thank you for giving your
You're
time and
welcome.
energy and your beautiful spirit with me and with my audience. This is just like you said, this is why I do this. This is what drew me to do this work, even though it's a passion project. I don't know what's happening from it, but I trust that it all comes together. And all I know is my heart feels so full connecting with people like you. And I
Mm,
think our mission is, we have different aspects of our mission, but our mission is the same. And it's to show love, to be love, to give love, and also to offer hope and
mm,
inspiration to other people, which is why I love doing this, is because people are so afraid of death, which is understandable. It's the unknown. And when we lose somebody here in this 3D world, it is devastating.
uh,
And yet, I think if we can spread that message that death is just it's not an ending. It's actually just a different state of consciousness, and that we're all going to be there. We're all there. We're just rotating positions. Um, so I think that's such a great it's so important to me to get the word out and share it, and not to push it on anybody, but just to keep what's the word, perpetuating that idea,
mhm.
I think.
Well, we are at a critical stage this year in particular, astrologically, where this great shift of change took place on December the 26th, 2021. And we are just actually entering this next decade. And so where we are right now collectively is kind of a repeat pattern of what happened to us in 1965. It's called the Age of Aquarius, identical. If you look about where we were in 1965 versus the Camelot era and the end of the Kennedy assassination and the Doris Days and the Rock Hudsons, and in 1965, Janis Joplin and Cher jumped on the horizon, and Beatlemania and Motown, all those things just collided into new revolution, the hippies. We went from suits and ties and gloves to blue jeans and long hair and no makeup. That's exactly where the same pattern. The next 10 years of our life is evolution or revolution. That's it. We either get it or we don't. And I think why you are critical to this particular time in life is you're bringing other messengers on this planet to share information. And again, maybe not your entire audience will get it, but if only one gets it, you and I have done our job.
Yes. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing what you do and to being in touch. And I'm just so honored that you are here with me today and
Thank you.
to share
Well,
your
it's my
message.
gift. I'm
Oh,
so thank you. It
thank
is truly
you.
an honor. And thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.